Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sovereign Spirits, where we explore methods on how to escape the reincarnation cycle, transcend the white light, and use our intention in a willful and powerful way to manifest an afterlife as sovereign spirits. I am here with co-creator and co-host of the show, Wayne Bush.
Well, hi, Julie. Hopefully, we have another interesting and informative episode again today.
I think we have a lot of material to cover, very interesting material. Today's episode will be part 3 of the In Between Lives material. Part 1 focused primarily on Dolores Cannon's book, Conversations with a Spirit Between Death and Life. In part 2, we went over Michael Newton's books, Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. We spent the bulk of our time on Michael's first book, Journey of Souls. His second book, Destiny of Souls, has some good parts too, and we covered a few in the last episode. One of our listeners, Eugene, shared another really good part of the book in the comments section, which we'd like to share today. And then another viewer asked us to look at chapters 9 through 12 of Seth Speaks by Jane Roberts. So we'll do that. And then we'll cover a little bit of a book by Robert Schwartz named Your Soul's Plan, the work of Italian hypnotherapist Calogero Grifasi, a little of what the Gnostic texts and Sumerian texts say, and touch upon what the Tibetan Book of the Dead says happens between lives in the Bardo state. And we do feel we would be remiss not to mention L. Ron Hubbard, who mentioned soul traps, the memory wipe, and alien implants 70 years ago.
Yeah, I know he's got that Scientology connection and everything, but you got to give the guy credit. I mean, we're not Scientologists. Got to get that out there right now or anything. Don't support them or promote them. But I mean, he talked about soul traps and memory wipes and implants over 70 years ago. So you got to give the guy some credit there. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think we can talk about this without at least mentioning his stuff. So
Right. All right, so are we gonna dive in?
let's dive.
Okay, let's
One
dive.
of our viewers, Lynn, commented that I did several hypnotic sessions to learn about my life between lives. I wish I could have done it with Michael Newton. I was not in a deep trance state, and I don't trust anything I came up with in these sessions. I was way too conscious the whole time, and I was encouraged to just say things, even if it was just making things up. And we replied, that's a very valuable comment. That's one of our major concerns. Like, some hypnotic subjects seem to go into deeper trances as if they're reliving the experiences, and those would be maybe more trustworthy. I mean, sometimes you read the Michael Newton stuff in the patients, obviously visibly discomforted or something. So they really seem to be either reliving the experience or having memories of it. Whereas other people, like Mary, Party One, replied to Lynn, said, I had a similar experience, Lynn. I felt like a complete waste of my time and money, gained no knowledge at all, and was fully conscious. So there are people that go to these. I think you had some similar experience yourself, if I remember you telling me.
Right. Yeah, did one of these sessions and I did not feel like I was fully in a trance state, and I was far too conscious, and it was encouraged to look, just get in this relaxed state, say whatever comes to your mind. And I'm like, okay. And I wasn't reliving anything. I didn't feel like I was really deep. So when I finished, I thought, I don't know how much of this I can even trust myself. So yeah.
Yeah, and I had somebody that I mentioned, Calogero Grifasi, too, so she went and had a session with him, and it was sort of a similar type thing. So you don't know how much you'd like to think that Newton and Cannon are very familiar with this, and they would only include in their book the subjects that they felt were reliving
Right.
or recalling. So,
Mm-hmm.
but Eugene said, here's another excerpt, or he wrote in the comments, here's another excerpt from Michael Newton's book that I find really interesting. And so we're going to read through that. And so Dr.
Yeah.
Newton says, so what does Venus, your guide, say to you when he meets you in the spirit world after your life in India? She says, welcome back. How did you like the ride? And what's your response? Did it have to be so terrible? Does she agree with your assessment of life in India? Venus reminds me that I volunteered to have a difficult opening life on Earth because I wanted to receive the full impact of a disruptive planet. I was the poorest of the poor in India and lived in squalor. Did you want to suffer this much in your initial life? The life was terrible and I didn't handle it well. When a childless family took my daughter against my will by paying the owner of the shack where I lived, I became so distraught I could not function. And jerks his hair and emotionally relives the moments after his last death. What kind of planet is this anyway? People selling children. And Dr. Newton says, it's just, well, he was saying that he didn't know yet about the hybrid origins of this person and made this wrong assumption and said it was a very difficult first incarnation for a new soul on Earth. And the subject says, who said I was a new soul? And he's like, I'm sorry, I just assumed that right now you're only in your second incarnation on Earth. And that's true, but I'm from another dimension. Oh, then what can you tell me about this other dimension? We had no physical worlds as you have in this dimension. My incarnations were on a mental world. What did you look like on this world? I had an elongated, flowing body, spongy with no skeletal structure. We were rather transparent forms of silvery light. Did you prefer a certain type of gender? We were all hermaphrodites. Kano, please explain the difference between traveling to the dimension of your origins from the spirit world as opposed to coming into our universe. In my dimension, movement is like going through soft, translucent filaments of light. Coming into your universe is like plowing through thick, heavy, moisture-laden fog. And being on Earth for the first time, what was that like compared to your homeworld? Having concrete tied to your feet. The first thing you notice is the heavy weight of the dense energy here compared to a mental world. It isn't just heavy, it's coarse, severe. I was really jolted in that life in India. Is all this a little better now? Are you becoming acclimatized? To some extent, it's pretty difficult. I can see that, Kano. What is the most troubling aspect about the human brain for you? It's the impulsive behavior, the physical reaction to things without analytical thought. There is danger in connecting with the wrong kind of human being, too. Treachery. I can't deal with this. Tell me about your mental world. Does it have a name? It's a sound which I can't recreate with my voice. We float in a sea of gentle mental currents, soft, playful, so unlike Earth. Then why come here? I am studying to be an explorer teacher. Most of my associates are satisfied to confine their efforts to one dimension. I finally told Venus I wanted broader experience with a hard world and completely different zone of existence. She told me she had a senior colleague who recommended another dimension with a strenuous physical world that had a reputation for producing vigorous, insightful souls once you survive the lessons. This was Earth. Did you get the impression there were other choices open to you? Guides don't give you many choices in such situations. Venus said that when I completed my work on Earth, I would be strengthened in ways my friends who refused such assignments would not be. She said Earth would also be quite interesting, and I accepted that. Did any of your friends come with you into our dimension? No, I was the only one who elected to go, and I almost refused to return again in this life. My associates think I am very brave. They know if I make it, I'm going to be an effective traveler. So, in the interest of time, I'm going to cut a little short here, but near the end, the subject says, I can't tell you much. Everything is in a circle around the center of the spirit world. Each of these universes appears to me to be an interlocking sphere within the next, as in a chain. And how are you getting on in our universe now, Kano? Better. I am learning how to discharge my energy in a steady, positive stream without depleting my reserve. It helps me to be away from people for long periods. I expect to really improve after a few more lives, but I am looking forward to completing my time here on Earth. I find it interesting that he's describing it as concentric things. Like I've always thought, we keep hearing about dimensions and, going up to 5D and ascension and all this stuff. Whereas I've always kind of thought like there's a 0 point or a center, like a source. Point of consciousness, and everything would be going out. And then remember, towards Cannon and Newton, they were talking about going across versus up and down.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that?
That is very interesting.
Yeah. So, so I guess want to get into the what's called the Seth material. That one of the viewers had mentioned that the chapters 9 through, he said you should focus on chapters 9 to 12 of Seth Speaks, which is specifically on this topic. So we looked at it, and I guess we'll just go over a little bit of it. This is channeled work. It was published in 1972 by Jane Roberts, and the book was called Seth Speaks. And in chapter 9, it says, the ideas that you have involving the nature of reality will strongly color your experiences, for you will interpret them in the light of your beliefs, even as now you interpret daily life according to your ideas of what is possible or not possible. Your consciousness may withdraw from your body slowly or quickly according to many variables. A belief in hell fires can cause you to hallucinate Hades conditions. A belief in a stereotyped heaven can result in a hallucination of heavenly conditions. You always form your own reality according to your ideas and expectations. This is the nature of consciousness in whatever reality it finds itself. Such hallucinations, I assure you, are temporary. So this idea is similar to what we've been saying, that you form your own reality according to your ideas, beliefs, expectations, and so on.
Right. Yep. In alignment with that, the
Yeah,
NDE.
so that part pretty good. Then it goes on, consciousness must use its abilities. The boredom and stagnation of a stereotyped heaven will not for long content the striving consciousness. There are teachers to explain the conditions and circumstances. You are not left alone, therefore, lost in mazes of hallucination. You may or may not realize immediately that you are dead in physical terms. You will find yourself in another form, an image that will appear physical to you and to a large degree, as long as you do not try to manipulate within the physical system with it. Then the differences between it and the physical body will become obvious. If you firmly believe that your consciousness is a product of your physical body, then you may attempt to cling to it. There is an order of personalities, an honorary guard, so to speak, who are ever ready to lend assistance and aid, however. Now, this honorary guard is made up of people in your terms, both living and dead. There are those who are living in your system reality perform these activities in an out-of-body experience while the physical body sleeps. They are familiar with the projection of consciousness, with the sensations involved, and they help orient those who will not be returning to the physical body. These people are particularly helpful because they are still involved with physical reality and have a more immediate understanding of the feelings and emotions involved at your end. So here again is this promotion of teachers, guides, even guards that supposedly help you. So, this is one point we might take issue with, perhaps. Just interesting.
Yep. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess there are definitely, well, I've heard stories where they've gone out of body or near-death experience, and it is very disorienting if you don't believe in an afterlife. You do think, okay, I'm still here in the physical, but these people are acting like I'm dead. I
Right.
think for those listening to this channel and you and I mean, we're very familiar. I don't think we would need guides. We already
Right.
know. We have so much information about what's going to happen after we cross over, especially if you've gone out of body one or several times. And I mean, I relate to a lot of this because as you know, I've gone out of body so many times.
Right.
It's very interesting how it is physical. You still feel physical out when you're out. But then you do get to know some extra special things. You're not as limited in the immediate astral, I guess, as I call it.
Yeah, and I would think if you want a guide, you should at least set the intention or put up a protection that, okay, I want a guide who's only has my best interest at heart. So it's like I wouldn't just trust necessarily any guide that comes along.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
right. But
Yeah.
I'm not saying
Mhm.
like all guides are necessarily bad. And maybe,
But
like you
even
say, some might need them if they're
Well,
completely
even that though, you have to be careful. They may have your best interest at heart, but be deceive themselves or have only
right.
partial knowledge of how
Exactly.
this system works. So you have to
That-
be very, very careful.
Right. So the book also goes on. It says, now you may or may not be greeted by friends or relatives immediately following death. This is a personal matter as always. Overall, you may be far more interested in people that you have known in past lives than those close to you in the present ones, for example. Your true feeling towards relatives who are also dead will be known to you and to them. There is no hypocrisy. You do not pretend to love a parent who did little to earn your love or respect. Telepathy operates without distortion in this after-death period. So you must deal with the true relationships that exist between yourself and all relatives and friends who await you. So I don't
Hmm.
know. It almost sounds like you can't be deceived, but yeah, we've heard of entities or beings shape-shifting and taking forms to make them feel comfortable. So
True. Right. Hmm.
It says you examine the fabric of the existence you have left, and you learn to understand how your experiences were the result of your own thoughts and emotions and how these affected others. Until this examination is through, you're not yet aware of the larger portions of your own identity. When you realize the significance and meaning of the life you have just left, then you're ready for conscious knowledge of your other existences. You become aware then of an expanded awareness. What you are begins to include what you have been in other lives, and you begin to make plans for your next physical existence if you decide upon one. You can instead enter another level of reality and then return to a physical existence if you choose. So, here they're talking about making plans for your next incarnation, and at least a little bit they'll mention the idea of there's better places to reincarnate on, and other levels of reality, as I just mentioned there.
Mm-hmm.
Says your consciousness as you think of it may, of course, leave your body entirely before physical death. Then it mentions that Christianity is believed in a heaven and a hell, a purgatory and reckoning. And so at death, to those who believe in these symbols, another ceremony is enacted, and the guides take on the guises of those beloved figures of Christian saints and heroes. So there's a little
Yeah.
exception.
Yeah.
Says, I'm speaking now of the events immediately following death, for there are other stages. Guides will helpfully become a part of your hallucinations in order to help you out of them, but they must first of all get your trust. So they mention guides take on guises, but they're supposedly to help you, but they must gain your trust first. So just be
It's a
careful.
little contradictory, though, that there's
Little,
telepathy makes it so that you know everybody's feelings about you, but yet your guides can trick you for your own
yeah.
good. Mm.
Or then you have to gain your trust first. It's like, well, is it either self-evident or not? Okay. So it says all of these hallucinatory activities take place usually some short time immediately following death. Some individuals are fully aware of their circumstances, and then they talk about maybe they can have a rest, they may become aware of their own reincarnational selves, and then there's a period of self-examination, a rendering of counts, so to speak, in which they're able to view their entire performance, their abilities and weak points, and to decide whether or not they will return to physical existence. So at least they're mentioning deciding whether or not to return to physical existence, implying, we have a choice and make the decision. There's no mention of karma yet, and it mentions these training centers. And then this says most individuals after death choose a more mature image that usually corresponds to the peak physical abilities, regardless of the age when the physical peak was reached. Others chose instead to take the form they had at the particular point when the greatest mental or emotional heights were achieved, regardless of the beauty or age that characterized the form. I'd always heard that most people choose around 30 years old or something like that.
Right.
But it says you will feel comfortable with the form that you choose, therefore, and you will usually use it when you want to communicate with others you have known. Though for such communications with the living, you may instead adopt the form you had when you're known to the individual you want to contact. So that was chapter 9. See, on to chapter 10. You appear in astral form in realities that are comparatively more advanced than your own. You're usually recognized because of your disorientation. You do not know how to manipulate. You do not know the customs. But whether you have a physical form or not, if you have emotions or feelings, these will take form. They have a reality. If you think strongly of an object somewhere, it will appear. If you think strongly of being in another location, a pseudo image of yourself will be projected out from you to that place, whether or not it is perceived and whether or not you yourself are conscious of it or conscious in it. This applies to those who have left your physical system and those who are in it. So this is something we've been stressing is a key. The knowledge that we can manifest objects or reality with our thoughts and intentions, and also teleport at will instantaneously. These concepts are pretty key, right?
Yeah. Again, when I've gone out of body, intention is super important to my ability to manifest things or to travel. It's just this thought, this strong desire or intention, and then you're there. So it's very interesting to me that these out of body experiences are very similar to the near death experiences. Some have even said that there's no difference between these. You don't have to be near death, you know.
Right. So if we can come to that realization that we don't have to be led around by these guides and masters and beings that are welcoming us, okay, you can come this way and right this way. Whereas we know we can be more proactive and be more in charge with, sovereignty. That's a great
Be more
thing.
discerning. We're going to
Mhm.
keep stressing that when you're out of body or near death or when you cross over
Yeah.
permanently. Don't just give your authority and your power away. Use protections and sit with your own, try and regain your own memories of what's going on.
Right.
Don't just
So
rely on anybody to tell you.
exactly. Chapter 11 is called After Death Choices and the Mechanics of Transition. And it says there are unlimited varieties of experience open to you after death, all possible. So, unlimited varieties, but some less probable than others, according to your development. Very generally, now there are three main areas, though exceptions in extraordinary cases can take other roads. So now they're saying that your options are based upon your development, which seems to imply learning and evolving again, which might be a red flag. Development. It says you may decide upon another reincarnation. You may decide to focus instead upon your past life, using it as a stuff of new experience, as mentioned previously, creating variations of events as you have known them, making corrections as you choose. Or you may enter another system of probability entirely, and this is quite apart from a reincarnational existence. You'll be leaving all thoughts of continuity of time behind you in such a case. So, at least they're saying you can enter another system entirely, which is good, right? um, it says some simply find the physical system not to their liking. Hello. And in such a way take leave of it. This cannot be done, however, until the reincarnational cycle, once chosen, is completed. So the last choice exists for those who have developed their abilities through reincarnation as far as possible within that system. So again, they were saying that you can't leave the reincarnational system until it's completed, and if you have developed your abilities through reincarnation, I can feel like this is saying we're not entirely sovereign beings. Then,
Making these rules.
yeah,
Who's
who's
making
making
these
these
rules
rules?
up?
And so this book is, some of what it's saying that it resonates with me is some good stuff. At least it's putting the possibilities out there that you can do other things. But
But
again,
even if you're reincarnating into another system or another planet or physical type world or even a mental world, isn't that still possibly this system that's controlled by other entities? Is just a thought. I don't know.
right, right. No, I
You're
understand.
still in the matrix, in a sense,
Just a
possibly.
different level of the matrix, maybe. Um, so some finished with reincarnation may choose to re-enter the cycle acting as teachers. And in such cases, some recognition of higher identity is always present. So, they're still promoting the system, saying that if you leave, you may choose to re-enter as teachers. So you're still, like you're saying, you're still part of that system if you're
So
going to buy
part
into that.
that
Yeah, so it
you
says
and I
before the
take
time,
issue
Mhm.
with.
Go on.
That you and I have take issue with the how the
Right.
system is being
Yeah.
run.
Yeah. It says, before the time of choosing, however, there's a period of self examination, and your full history becomes available to you. You understand the nature of the entity, and you're advised by other portions of that entity more advanced than yourself. You will become aware of your other reincarnational selves, for example. There will be emotional ties with other personalities who you've known in past lives, and some of these may supersede your relationships in the immediate past life. This is a meeting place for individuals from your own system, also, however. All necessary explanations are given to those who are disoriented. Those who do not realize that they are dead are here told of their true condition. It says it's a time of study and comprehension. It's from this area that some disturbed personalities have those dreams of returning to the physical environment.
Hmm.
It says some will choose progression at an easier rate and in a more balanced manner. They will help keep all the strands of personality working at once, so to speak, and even meet again and again people they have known in other lives. They will work out problems at a rather easy rate rather than in, say, an explosive way. They will pace themselves as dancers do. In this time of rest and choosing, all counsel is given. Some personalities do reincarnate before they are advised to for many reasons. This is usually unfortunate in the short run, for the necessary planning has not taken place. But in the long run, great lessons will still be learned from the air. There is no time schedule, and yet it's very unusual for an individual to wait for anything over 3 centuries between lives. Um, So, at least they're saying that you can take an easier path if you want. You can go to some better planets that aren't quite as harsh as this. If you did have to, for some reason, take a gazillion, I don't know, lifetimes somewhere. It just still doesn't make sense to me. But
Yeah, I still am gonna say if you can go to planets where there's not this level of extreme cruelty, why even have this planet here? What's the
exactly.
rush, which we've talked about? Why is this even an option?
I guess maybe this, I don't know. I guess anything's possible. And so maybe they want, like, I just don't want to come down. So I'm just going to get it all done all at once and have the most ridiculously
Or,
extreme.
or is that a manipulation? You need to grow, you
Right.
need to evolve, and somebody else is using our energy of
Yeah.
reincarnating for their own good.
Because they seem to promote this as the best option because you learn so much so
Need more
quickly.
suffering.
Right. So they'll be like, yeah, sure, you can do it in a slow manner, but we really think this is the best one right here to do. And so people just go along with it. So it says earthly existence is a training period. Ideas of good, better, best can lead you astray. For example, you're learning to be as completely as possible. In one way, you are learning to create yourselves. And it says this does not mean that good does not exist or that in your terms you do not progress, but your concepts of good and progression are extremely distorted. So this teaching is the one that kind of denies or downplays that there are such things as good and evil, or it says that they are necessary in order to learn. I don't know, but some of these extreme suffering down here and some of the quote unquote evils are pretty drastic and nothing I would certainly want anybody to partake in. It just seems to try to justify that it's really hard to do, in my opinion, when it's not necessary.
I agree.
Yeah, so it says those who choose to leave the system, whose reincarnational cycles are finished, have many more decisions to make. Entering the field of probabilities can be compared to entering the reincarnational cycle. There will be a sustained focus of awareness in existence in an entirely different sort of reality. So this field of probabilities almost sounds like it almost may be referring to the so-called void that we talked about in the near-death experiences. It's this realm that's seemingly both nothing and everything at the same time, where all possibilities exist. So it's nice that at least they're talking in the book about these things. This was back in the early 1970s, so that's
Right.
good.
Yeah.
Says they will grow in consciousness and continue their own lines of development on different levels. In one way, we are all thought forms, and this will be further explained in the material dealing with the God concept. Understand, however, that I do not mean that we lack our own initiative for action, individuality, or purpose. But it talks about in this time of choosing, it keeps using this time of choosing. It's your time of choosing, time for you to choose now. All of these matters are considered and suitable, that was that cosmic pressure we mentioned in the earlier episodes. And suitable preparations made, but the planning itself is all a part of experience and of development. The in-between existence, therefore, is every bit as important as the period that is chosen. You learn to plan your existences, in other words, and you also make friends and acquaintances in these rest periods whom you meet again and again, and only perhaps during in-between existences. With them, you may discuss your experience during reincarnational cycles. These are like old friends. So this is the life planning that was discussed in these, our pre-birth memory episodes where the guides, help you pre-plan your next life and stuff. A
Interesting.
belief.
I've heard that before, that they have relationships or friendships, however you want to say it, on the in-between state that they've never had a life with.
Yeah,
So
it
you make
is.
these relationships on this in the in-between state.
Right. It says a belief in heaven or hell under certain conditions can be equally disadvantageous. Some will refuse to accept the idea of further work, development, and challenge, believing instead that conventional heaven situations are the only possibility. For some time, they may indeed inhabit such an environment until they learn through their own experience that existence demands development and that such a heaven would be sterile, boring, and indeed deadly. Then they are ready for the time of choosing. Others may insist that because of their transgressions they would be cast into hell, and because of the force of such belief they may for some time actually encounter such conditions. In either case, however, there are always teachers available. They try to get through these false beliefs. So here again is this almost like shaming tactic that if you don't want to come down and suffer again under this guise of further work, that you're somehow a problem child of sorts and you're holding a false belief. It's just.
But I mean, I have shared with you my concern of these hollow heavens and hollow hells, or that are we've read about in the Monroe books and heard through NDEs, and how we're drawn to these places with some people say it's our frequency or our belief system. Our belief system will color what happens to us or where we end up, and that even those who don't believe in reincarnation, which Christianity and some of these monotheistic faiths, they don't believe in reincarnation, they'll end up reincarnating eventually, because as we've heard over and over again, you go to these places and it's exactly what you thought it would be, and you're all worshiping on Sunday or Saturday or whatever, and then eventually a guide will
Jesus
show
is like, I really need you to go back down to earth and spread the word and witness to people.
all the little more. Yeah. So I mean, that concerns me, honestly, for my loved ones who
Sure.
are there probably in that heaven or are going to go to that heaven, and then they'll end up being talked into coming back to this place. Oh, it's a horrible thought. Anyway, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's a really good point you're making. It says those who understand thoroughly that reality is self-created will have least difficulty. Those who have learned to understand and operate in the mechanics of the dream state will have great advantage. A belief in demons is highly disadvantageous after death, as it's during your physical existence. A systemized theology of opposites is also detrimental. If you believe, for example, that all good must be balanced by evil, then you bind yourself into a system reality that is highly limiting, and that contains within it the seeds of great torment. Then it says, I really like this part right here. It says, the experiment that would transform your world would operate upon the basic idea that you create your own reality according to the nature of your beliefs, and that all existence was blessed and that evil did not exist in it. If these ideas were followed individually and collectively, then the evidence of your physical senses would find no contradiction. They would perceive the world and existence as good. This is the experiment that has not been tried, and these are the truths that you must learn after death. So, here's one of the ideas that we've been proposing, that you can create an all positive reality, which seems impossible in the system of duality. So I love the fact that this book touched upon it. And yet in the same breath, it still promotes the idea of coming back to earth, to explain these ideas. Because it said, I forgot to read this part. It says, some after death, understanding these truths, choose to return to physical existence and explain them. It says through the centuries, this has been the way. So.
Wow. Well. Yeah, I just, why does duality exist? It sounds like this person is saying, because you think it exists. Well, then how were we first exposed to it? And how you and I are saying, well, what can't we go create an existence that is like neutral and very wonderful? Because there's that thought, well, no, equal swing.
Like they want us to say, it has to oscillate between really good and just horrible extreme suffering. Well, why can't it just oscillate between really great and like a lull or nothing, like a lack of that greatness, where it's kind of like, it doesn't have to be an extreme. Like you would still appreciate that good if you went through a period of like, okay, I want that good back. It doesn't have to be such like a 50-50 thing. Why can't it just be temper, like, just go a real quick thing where it's
over and over again. There's no reason for this type of this particular reality at the levels of suffering and cruelty. Is just not acceptable and not necessary.
I agree. The book says, others, finished with reincarnations and of a different overall nature, may begin the long journey leading toward the vocation of a creator. On a much different plane, this can be compared to geniuses in creative fields within your own physical reality. Instead of paints, pigments, words, musical notes, the creators begin to experiment with dimensions of actuality, imparting knowledge in as many forms as possible, and I do not mean physical forms. What you would call time is manipulated as an artist would manipulate pigment. What you would call space is gathered together in different ways. Art is created then using time, for example, as a structure. In your terms, time and space may be mixed. It says one of their main preoccupations is to create beauty that impinges itself in many various dimensions of reality as possible. So, this is saying we can move on and just be more like creators expressing our creativity instead of learning and evolving through like these eons of suffering and these human avatars. I mean, this is more in line with what we're thinking, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So in chapter 12 is reincarnational relationships. It says, throughout your reincarnational existences, you expand your consciousness, your ideas, your perceptions, your values. You break away from self-adopted restrictions and you grow spiritually as you learn to step aside from limiting conceptions and dogmas. Your rate of learning depends entirely upon you, however. Limited, dogmatic, or rigid concepts of good and evil can hold you back. Too narrow ideas of the nature of existence can follow you through several lives if you do not choose to be spiritually and psychically flexible. So here again is this promotion of expanding and growing and becoming somehow bigger, brighter, or better as this result of incarnating. So it's like, the book is like, it's 50-50. It's like some of it's good stuff is
Right.
thinking forward, at least in larger terms, but it's still promoting this idea of learning and evolving and coming back to earth so much.
Growing, expanding, bigger, better, bigger. When's enough enough? Why?
Yeah, and it's trying to justify it. So
Well,
if you had no sympathy for the sick, you may then be born with a serious disease, again, now self-chosen, and find yourself encountering those attitudes that were once your own. Such an existence would usually also include other issues, however. No existence is chosen for one reason only, but will also serve many other psychological experiences. A chronically ill existence, for example, might also be a measure of discipline, enabling you to use deeper abilities that you ignored in a life of good health. The perfectly happy life, for example, on the surface may appear splendid, but it may also be basically shallow and do little to develop the personality. The truly happy existence, however, is a deeply satisfying one that would include spontaneous wisdom and spiritual joy. I'm not saying, in other words, that suffering necessarily leads to spiritual fulfillment, nor that an illness is accepted or chosen for such a purpose, for this is not the case.
sounds
But so
karma.
they're like saying it in like two sides of their mouth almost. Like, I'm not saying that, but yet they just said it, right?
Yeah.
So that's the end of this section on the Seth material. It's pretty interesting. And of
Very
course, I've heard
interesting.
of the Seth material, Jane Roberts, and it's one of the more well-known ones, just like the raw
Yes, yes.
material and some others. But I guess it was interesting. What I wanted to say is that, it's interesting, these books about between lives that came out before Raymond Moody's books about NDEs, she never mentions the light or the white light or going into the light, and it kind of makes you wonder how accurate they really are, because Seth Speaks came out in 1972 and Life After Life didn't come out until 1975. So it seems like these ones, like in the same thing when they were on Hubbard, when you talk about the 1950s, they're not talking about the white light. You go to the light after you died, and you're in the light,
Yeah.
and they never once do until Raymond Moody, his book, with all these near-death experiences. Now everybody's including the light and all their, wisdom. Just found that interesting.
Yeah, very.
Yeah.
So what's up next?
Your Soul's Plan
Plan?
by Robert Schwartz.
What
Discovering the
is
real meaning of the life you planned before you were born. This is kind of pre-birth memories. It could have fit into that one too, because it's discovering the real meaning of the life you planned before you were born. But the book, it recounts 10 cases of these channelers and mediums, revealing how we pre-plan our lives. So, we'll probably do like a show or segment on mediums and all that kind of stuff too. So a lot of this stuff overlaps, but since it does deal with kind of the between lives, we'll touch on it. There's a section on soul planning prior to birth, and it says, we have in-depth conversations with our spirit guides and the other souls with whom we will share our incarnation. We discuss the lessons we hope to learn and the ways in which we will learn them. When Stacy accesses these discussions and the places in which they are held, she sees certain commonalities. A room in which the incarnating souls gather to talk, a smaller adjoining room from which the guides monitor the planning coming forth when called upon for advice, a black and white chessboard or flowchart used to map if-then scenarios in the life to come. The squares on the chessboard are developmental stages in the individual's life. Why we incarnate. The planning we do before birth is far-reaching and detailed. It includes but goes well beyond the selection of life challenges. We choose our parents and they choose us, when and where we will incarnate, the schools we will attend, the homes in which we will live, the people we will meet, and the relationships we will have. When we enter the earth plane, we forget our origins in spirit. We know prior to incarnation that we will have such self-induced amnesia. Yes. The phrase behind the veil refers to this state of forgetfulness. As divine souls, we seek to forget our true identities because remembering will give us a more profound self-knowing. To obtain this deeper awareness, we leave the non-physical realm, a place of joy, peace, and love, because there we experience no contrast to ourselves. Without contrast, we cannot fully know ourselves. Picture, if you will, a world in which there's only light. If you have never experienced darkness, how well would you comprehend and appreciate light? It is the contrast between light and dark that leads to a richer understanding and ultimately a remembering. The physical plane provides us with this contrast because it is one of duality, up and down, hot and cold, good and bad. The sorrow in duality allows us to better know joy. The chaos of earth enhances our appreciation of peace. The hatred we may encounter deepens our understanding of love. If we never experience these aspects of humanity, how would we know our divinity? So here they're saying contrast is necessary, sort of like the idea of the movie Bliss that we mentioned. You need to sacrifice a bit to truly appreciate how good it is on the other side. I don't know. I can see a little bit of that, but it's still, once again, it's like, there's something going wrong with the whole thing if you have to come here if you have to experience pain and suffering to just truly appreciate what you're
Well, and as we mentioned, even if this philosophy is true, how many times do you have to do it over and over and over and over and over and over, thousands and thousands of lives? Right?
I guess every once in a while, just to like, oh yeah, that's right, I got it pretty good here.
I don't know. I don't buy that.
Yeah.
There's something off on that. Mm-hmm.
It says, naturally, we plan life challenges in part for our own personal growth. Here we go again. We got to get bigger. As souls, we learn a great deal between incarnations, but the lessons become more deeply instilled in us when we concretize them on the physical plane. Learning while in spirit is similar to classroom work. Life on Earth is the field study in which we apply, test, and enhance that knowledge, a powerful experience for the soul. Ultimately, regardless of the specific challenges they contained, every life blueprint I examined was based on love. Love is the primary theme of pre-birth planning, and therefore the primary theme of this book. As we enter the physical plane, we are love, temporarily hidden from itself. When we remember who we really are, our inner light, our love, shines forth for all to see. That, I believe, is why we are here. It's the book. And
yeah, and how many times do you have to do that for that to shine through? And you're like, oh yeah, I forgot I was love. Okay, but we leave that state to forget it and remember it again. That makes no sense to me.
Right. So it's contradictory or just illogical. It's like they're talking about challenges as a reason we might come here. I mean, maybe, but that love is the reason we're here. I mean, but if everything was so great there, then why would we need or want to come here for this challenge or to appreciate things? There just seems to be something off. It doesn't.
It's like he's talking in circles, and if it doesn't make sense, it's senseless.
Right. And so then they're saying, like, did John plan before birth to have the experience of AIDS in this lifetime? And then it's like, yes, certainly. It's like the between times are spent accessing and planning for what the soul considers to be the next step, the next level or plateau. And then it talks about this. The angel conveyed a primary purpose of life challenges to show us how our thoughts and feelings create our reality. Challenges are mirrors that reflect to us our feelings about ourselves. And it says that you act on baser frequencies. As the soul enters the body, the clarity for the most part disappears. And as a human, you begin to believe that you're the body. You cease to remember that you are the soul. This is part of the plan, because to forget your divinity and through many trials remember the truth brings about greater power, solidifies beliefs, and uplifts that frequency to higher levels. Once again, it's about greater power, going up, uplifting, higher levels.
More power and solidified beliefs. That's a little bit of a red flag.
Beliefs need solidifying? Are they so weak to begin with? Like,
I don't know. And the beliefs, just to me, is a little bit of a red flag because I'm trying to shed all my beliefs
Yeah,
so I
no
can.
kidding.
If beliefs color your experience after you cross over, then maybe I should just not have any beliefs and start clean.
Or not cling to such them. I mean, maybe just try different yeah, beliefs is too strong of a word. You might explore different ideas, but not
Hold them
just
loosely, explor, but don't
yes,
let them
exactly.
own you, so to speak. Maybe
Right.
you can own them, but don't let them own you and control you.
Mhm. It says the angel was helping me to understand how physical illness could stimulate spiritual healing. Even so, I wondered why such healing would be needed in the first place. Hello, yeah. And it says, the shame John is trying to heal the belief that he's not deserving of unconditional love. Where did that originally come from? How was it created? I asked.
Yep.
Um, Within the bloodline of that spirit group, it was designed in an individual who was part of an organized religion. It goes on, it says, action on the physical plane concretizes emotion, making it more deeply a part of our being. It is for this reason that subsequent incarnations are often designed for healing. That which is created in the physical is most readily healed in the physical. It was a calculated drop into darkness, continued the angel, into a vibration so low it had not been experienced by the soul group previously. So, in this experiment, genetically through the DNA, this code, the energy of fear, was passed and truly became a far reaching code that many other soul groups adopted, seeing that it was useful in descending into lower levels of frequency. The angel is referring to the desire of souls to experience contrast in order to arrive at a deeper self knowing. The further distance from the truth of one's being, the darker it becomes and the lower the frequency. As the soul group through incarnations makes its way through this murky, heavy energy, it clears. The soul group becomes cognizant once again of the light, the truth. Its awareness becomes stabilized. So it's like, once again, they're emphasizing this need for contrast and the idea that somehow forgetting or sacrificing your divinity somehow leads to higher levels.
Yeah, I don't know. You don't, so there, I've heard that when you're there, you know yourself. You are in this perfect place of understanding, and then you leave. So they're saying you leave that place, come to the physical to not understand, to not know yourself, so that when you go back, you know yourself better.
Right. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. So it says, we had now come to the timeless issue of human suffering. I did not want the angel to feel challenged by my next question, but the suffering in my own life had been so profound at times that I simply had to understand the necessity for it. In many ways, my need for such understanding had propelled me to set up this session. Why do it that way? I inquired. Why not design a pleasant life with plenty of unconditional love? Wouldn't that be an easier way to learn that one is deserving of it? A
Yes.
balance is obtained by experiencing both the light and the dark, said the angel. All individuals who incarnate into your realm experience both being both the light and the dark in some incarnation. One may choose to become that individual who exterminates an entire tribe of humans. One may choose to abuse children. All of these things create a level of learning and knowing. This is truly the realm in which there exists a polarity of good and bad. Finding the balance between the light and the dark, the good and the bad, brings you out of that realm, moves you away from the sense of duality, and creates within you instead a belief in all that is. The angel was referring to the divine nature and unity of all that exists in the universe. I know you're dying to say something.
I just say I'm just like not buying this. I don't have to literally experience abusing a child to know that that's not a good thing and I wouldn't want to do it or experience being abused. I mean,
And certainly not more
you
than
can
once. you know.
certainly not more than once. You can just watch it on, TV or whatever, and you see how horrific it is, and you know immediately, no, I don't need to experience that to know I don't want to do it or be a part of it. I don't buy it.
Yeah, so they're saying that finding a balance of good and bad somehow brings you out of the duality. Or is that just like getting you to accept both good and bad? I mean, why not create a reality where there's no bad, only happy, positive thing? I mean, that's where we came from initially, right? It's just there's no
They're in an
bad, so why?
existence where there's not this duality,
It's like they're in a
and we leave it
non-duality
to
existence.
experience. Just
Why, if that seems like a great place, you're in non-duality, so why create a duality of both good and bad?
mhm.
Where 50-50 or whatever. It's just this doesn't make any sense. So they're talking about this learning through opposites life plan, where the individual chooses before birth to experience the lack of what he or she most wants to understand and appreciate.
Mm.
It's just the same thing. So why? Oh, then finally it says there are many reasons, including self. This part, this is amazing. So they go. It was as though so she finally like asked why souls plan to experience a major illness in a lifetime. And so it says for the first time in this session, she was channeling her spirit guide verbatim. It was as though he knew we had come to the end of the reading and wanted to offer his concluding remarks. There are many reasons, including selflessness and selfishness. Major illnesses can be used to make major modifications within oneself and one's belief system, values, and judgments. Sometimes it is a form of karmic balancing. So now it's like you need this like major modification, which you're already in a place of perfection, right? You need this major modification, some kind of karmic balancing. It's like you didn't have karma in the first place. It's like
It's just crazy. Yeah. Yeah. Very.
yeah, so that's
I like
basically
information.
that book.
It's
And
okay. So that was interesting. All right. And then, man, I hope this is helpful to you guys out there listening. Um, Again, if you want to pick up these books, well, I'll list all this stuff in the description so they can have access to it. But who's
sure.
up next?
Calogero, I hope I'm saying that name right. Calogero Grifasi. He's an Italian hypnotherapist. And I first read this account along with a few others like 5 years ago in an interview on Adam Crabb's podcast show, The Crabs Files. But, Calogero, he's gone way beyond where like Michael Newton and Dolores Cannon were. Like he's completely aware of the soul trap theory. And so like he says in this one interview, he says, when we normally go into a session of regressive hypnosis, a session about the reincarnational cycle, we often see this welcoming old man, a being made of light, a person somehow giving a sense of security, positivity, whatever, that we have to follow at a certain moment. But then upon following him, we get to a place that is not the place. It's a different place where everything is ruled by fear, by pain and suffering. And that's when we end up reincarnating on the earth. And that's why I strongly believe this reincarnational cycle is something we must break. We must break it to definitely be set free from this cage. I guess we instinctively break it when, anyway, during this reincarnational game, whether we like it or not, we acquire an awareness. They use us for their goals. During the reincarnational cycle, they use us to steal our energy, as the entity was telling you about. It's just as if we were farm animals, cattle. So they breed us to feed themselves for fun, for whatever reason, experiments, whatever, what we human beings do with animals. We are in a reincarnational cycle, which we believe we have to go through in order to evolve. Actually, there's a truth in all this. I mean, as a matter of fact, it's an experience which allows us to evolve. Still, the main aim is not our evolution. That's only a collateral effect. The main aim is the use of a third entity who can manipulate this because they are in a higher dimension, therefore they can manipulate us. So as long as we believe we need to reincarnate in order to evolve, says also because we don't need to learn anything, because as long as we are separated from universal general awareness, conscious, whatever you want to call it, as long as we are separated, therefore isolated into this body, into this mind, or into other bodies somewhere else, we are not aware. We need to get information from the part we were cut off from. When a person is under hypnosis and manages to get in touch with this general universal awareness, even though the information is limited, contaminated, and altered, that person in that very moment will enjoy things she never thought she would get to know during her daily life. I very often hypnotize people who know absolutely nothing about a certain topic, and they start talking to me about that subject with a university professor's knowledge. They tell me things they don't even know where they come from. Then they think they might have invented them, but if you go back and check about the subject, they really make sense. So we don't need to learn. We actually need no reincarnational cycle in order to learn. All we need to do is get rid of all this. We're all connected to a general awareness. We know it all. We're all together one single thing, as one single thing. So the fact that we are all isolated in these bodies, that they do not allow us to get in touch with the universal general conscious that we are made of, the awareness itself, we belong to and through a structure of beliefs. They make us believe we need to acquire knowledge, whereas we only need to reach out for it. We need to learn through suffering. We need to learn through the reincarnational cycle, through injustice, sacrifices, pain. No, I don't see the reason for this. All this only generates low vibrational energy. All it prevents us from knowing about the whole situation. So he, a lot of, once again, a lot of people that go to him for hypnotherapy and regressions and stuff, they probably already know his beliefs and they're probably on board with that. So you don't know if they're telling him what he wants to hear, but he is a regressionist who has uncovered a lot of interesting cases for sure. I could go over one in particular. There's quite a few, but just one would give you the main idea.
Okay.
There was an investigation on reincarnation cycle with Gwen, and there's this light being named Samuel wants to show her what's beyond. He takes her near a waterfall, and she sees some light, a tunnel, a river, a boat, a garden. They get to a waterfall with a tunnel behind it, and she says the feeling she gets are not that positive. She won't take his hand, but she follows him. She goes with him through the tunnel where there's a dark place. So she goes back through the tunnel to where she was. Now the being looks like a man with human features, white long hair and beard, old. She says his role is to teach, to lead the way between the garden and the other life, to lead during the transition inside the tunnel. She says there, all the souls who didn't want to go toward the light, they are not good. Souls in standby that don't want the light, and that's why it's dark there. The garden is the place where we get to when we finish our vital path and we get into the extraterrestrial dimension, the place we are welcomed after death, he says. Calogero takes her to the first few steps in the process of reincarnation and sees what happens. She sees a gate like an entrance to a town with many structures, as if she has to make reincarnation requests, as if the application form had to be placed in this structure. She says many families decide to do it together as a life project, like written down on a piece of paper and handed to the larger entities. One of the entities tells her the project is almost always accepted, but that we build our own fate, because when you get back there, you'll have to judge whether your project was right or wrong. She says it's a painful process because in the other dimension, we are aware it will be hard, and we know we are being tested, and it's painful because we lose energy, and that's painful to the body and the spirit. She says there's always a different person who wants to take her for a ride to go with them because they deal with reincarnation, but it always becomes something dark. So she recalls a life before Christ. He tells her to go to the moment of her death. She says she gets to a place with clouds above and beneath. A light materializes into a person dressed in white, telling her, "Good, you did a great job." He tells her to go now, and a bright portal opens up. She reunites with a lot of people asking her how it went. She's in a sort of room and wonders, what shall I do now? What is my next job? Calogero asks her, doesn't she want to explore other worlds before going back down to Earth? But she says no, she likes the Earth and they need her. She says she is arguing with the guy. Calogero proposes they tell the guy she doesn't want to go back to Earth anymore. The being says she can rest. Calogero tells her to go to the place where souls are getting ready to reincarnate, so she sees a classroom, a school. The same being is telling them that help is needed down there. But the souls don't seem too aware, so Calogero asks her to go to the place where the reincarnation is being decided, and she goes to a garden, and a figure who looks like Jesus is there. "Welcome, I am the master," he says. She says he claims to be Jesus, but the Jesus figure is frowning at her as if mind your own business. The soul is kneeling as if it really is Jesus and thinking this Jesus for dragging him out of some muddy place. He holds his hand and takes him to a city with walls around it. She sees an angel flying around, and Calogero asks how high its vibration is, and she says he's not bright, but that she is. She says he is vibrating at 836, and she is vibrating at 10,000 or more. She says the being that was lifted from the mud was vibrating at 160, and he's in real ecstasy. She says this place really looks like paradise there, just as we know it. She says there are mountains, creeks, flowers, grass, and little angels flying around, butterflies. She sees it as extremely fake, though, like theater stages for children with a fabric background. Calogero asks what's behind the fabric background. She says nothing. She sees like a hologram. It's like a cinema screen. He asks what's behind the movie screen. She sees a glass ball and nothing behind it. It's like seeing a glass wall with nothing behind it. The Jesus figure tells the poor guy, "You've been very naughty. That's why you are there. You've got to go down and try to do things better. He was a traitor, a cheater. He stole, he abused a dog." So Jesus tells him he needs to go back to the earth. She says he claims to be Jesus, but he's rather gross. He takes the shape of who comes along, of his expectations. He reads into the other person and automatically and gives the answer they are looking for. Jesus says we are all here to learn. He says, but Jesus never said to reincarnate. And Jesus says you have to be very smart in order not to reincarnate anymore. Jesus tells him, you were not good, so I am leading you to perfection. Try not to make any mistakes. It won't be easy. We need to delete your memory so you become pure again. I'll delete your faults, like he's giving him another chance. Calogero tells her to tell the guy to ask Jesus why he should delete his memories. How will he improve if he can't remember? He answers he needs to evaluate the soul, not the human being. It would be too easy otherwise. Calogero wants him to ask the difference between the being and soul. Calogero asks her to ask the guy if Jesus' answers are convincing, and he says yes, because it's Jesus. She sees them passing through a filter and they pass out. They are taken down like dematerializing. If you want to reincarnate, you have to go through this filter. She asks the man if he wants to reincarnate, and he says yes, because he wants to improve. Calogero tells her to tell the guy he could choose not to reincarnate anymore. He won't go to Earth, he will go somewhere else. He says there are more beautiful places to go to and to tell Jesus he doesn't want to reincarnate. The guy is afraid Jesus will get mad at him, and Calogero asks if that sounds like the nature of Jesus. Jesus tells him it's a demon. Jesus gives up and says, you can take this one, there are others for his business. So the guy now doesn't know where to go. Now next to him, there's a wall made of rubber that he is touching. He's waking up, but is upset because she talked him into leaving that beautiful place. She sees spheres, the sphere called planet Earth below. She sees something going back and forth, souls coming from the Earth. Calogero asks who's running the system. She doesn't know. He asks her to tell the guy to look at Jesus again, and he sees his real features, those he really uses in his dimension. She says she sees him as a reptilian. He says he sees him as a green energy. She sees a reincarnation sphere linked to the Pleiades. She sees a planet with a ball on top and always these souls going back and forth. She sees a passage from the Earth to the Pleiades, but not from the Pleiades sphere to Earth. And she says a Pleiadian being came to warn, and that there are 3 reptilian beings, and maybe a man is near her because he's an open channel. And she said she built like a dome around her, and she rejected him. Anyway, so she's like talking about this, these different planets and stuff. So she comes back to the body, and so Calogero tells her to start coming back to her body. She says the spirit is there telling him that what he said about they send us on the Earth with deception so that they can feed on our energy. But anyway, there's an awakening, a collateral effect, but as long as it lasts, they do it. And in order for us to reach this awareness, we need to live lives on the Earth. It's a giving and taking. Those from the Interstellar Committee, and that's why they let us play this kind of game, because more and more people are waking up lately. It's very hard to. He speaks in Italian, and I'm trying to like translate, or I don't know. It's very difficult to follow the exact language, but that's more or less one example of his cases. So he does deal with in between lives, right, and the deception that's involved. So we have to mention that. That would be.
Oh my word, that's something, man.
Yeah. Once again, who knows how accurate it all is, but it's it's more evidence to consider for sure.
Yeah, well, at least when you come across these entities, and as you know, I've interviewed several NDEers, and they are just trusting these entities that they come across, and as they're sharing their experience, I'm thinking, well, that doesn't sound like something Jesus would say, or an angel would say, or somebody that has my best interest at heart would say. And I find it, I don't know, puzzling why a lot of these cases, they just trust the entity because, well, they know more than I do. They're at a higher level. It's this saint or that
assumptions.
It's like they're not using their reasoning for some reason. Well, there's got to be a reason for it. They love me. I don't know. Yeah, let's question these entities. That one was clearly not what Jesus
Who
would
they
say.
purported to be, right? Nothing like Jesus.
Oh boy.
So
That's
yeah, you ready to move on to the Sumerian tablets? I'm not going to spend a lot of time
Yes.
because when we get
Yes.
into religion and stuff like that, we'll dig deeper into, like, Sumerian tablets and the Gnostic stuff and the Tibetan, but just wanted to mention them real quickly, just for whatever reason.
We're
And
about an hour in, a little over an hour, just
yeah,
to let
this
you know
won't
where
take too much to wrap up. We're almost near the end. These sections are really quick. So there is there's one Sumerian tablet that says Inki decreed its fate. And it says, Sumer, great mountain, land of heaven and earth, trailing glory, bestowing powers on the people from sunrise to sunset. Your powers are superior powers, untouchable, and your heart is complex and inscrutable. Like heaven itself, your just matrix, in which gods too can be born, is beyond reach. Giving birth to kings who put on the good diadem, giving birth to lords who wear the crown on their heads. Your lord, the honored lord, sits with An, the king on An's dais. Your king, the great mountain, Father Enlil, the father of all the lands, has blocked you impenetrably like a cedar tree. The Anuna, the great gods, have taken up dwellings in your midst and consumed their food in your shrines among the unique and exceptional trees. Household Sumer, may your sheepfolds be built and your cattle multiply. May your Guguna touch the skies. May your good temples reach up to heaven. May the Anuna determine the destinies in your midst. So, like in this Sumerian text, Enki is decreeing that, like, Sumer is this matrix that's patterned after heaven, and one in which the kings lord over. And these Anuna gods, the Anunnaki, they take up dwelling there, and they breed sheep and cattle and stuff. And Nungal said it's a prison or jail, like it says, quote, because the lady has revealed her greatness, because she has provided the prison, the jail, her beloved dwelling with awesome radiance, praised to be Nungal. This is talking about probably the shining light in the afterlife, where these, the Galu, they call them, or helpers, are, it's kind of like translated to constable or police. They're like these demons. So, and it says, I keep an eye upon the people. They are under my surveillance. I hold the tablet of life in my hand, and I register the just ones on it. The evildoers cannot escape my arm. I learn their deeds. Nungao, its lady, the powerful goddess who aura covers heaven and earth, resides on its great and lofty dais. Having taken a seat in the precinct of the house, she controls the land from there. And, like, there's this quote on, it's basically on reincarnation. It says, the interior of the temple gives rise to weeping, laments, and cries. Its brick walls crush evil men and give rebirth to just men. It says, when the time arrives, the prison is made up as for a public festival. The gods are present at the place of interrogation, at the river ordeal, to separate the just from the evildoers. A just man's giving rebirth. Nungao clamps down on her enemy, so he will not escape her clutches. It says there's this hymn to Nungao. It says, house, furious storm of heaven and earth, battering its own enemies, prison, jail of the gods, august neckstock of heaven and earth. Its interior is evening light, dusk spreading wide. Its awesomeness is frightening, raging sea which mounts high, no one knows where its rising waves flow. It says, when the time arrives, the prison's made up as a for a public festival. The gods are present at the place of interrogation. It says, when an individual is brought in, he cannot resist its aura. What does that sound like? That somebody can't resist the light, right? You can't resist the aura.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's just a little bit of what I found in the Sumerian text that kind of describe, they're giving rebirth to just men and punishing the evildoers.
All the way back. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so the Gnostic text, Mista Sophia is one of the prominent Gnostic texts, and it talks about the fashioning of souls of men. And it says, and Melchizedek, the receiver of the light, purifies those powers and carries their light into the treasury of the light. While the servitors of all the rulers gathered together all matter from them all, and the servitors of all the rulers of the fate, and the servitors of the sphere which is below the ions, take it and fashion it into souls of men and cattle and reptiles and wild beasts and birds, and send them down into the world of mankind. And further, the receivers of the sun and the receivers of the moon, if they look above and see the configurations of the path on the ions and the configurations of the fate and those of the sphere, then they take from them the light power. And the receivers of the sun get it ready and deposit it until they hand it over to the receivers of Melchizedek, the light purifier. And their material refuse they bring to the sphere, which is below the ions, and fashion it into the souls of men, fashion it also into the souls of reptiles and of cattle, wild beasts, and birds, according to the circle of the rulers of that sphere and according to all the configurations of its revolution. They cast them into this world of mankind, and they become souls in this region. So there's these retributive servitors that follow the soul, and they're witnesses to it for all the sins which it commits, that they may convict it in the judgments. It says, when the time is completed through the sphere, the receivers of Yadabaoth, the demiurge, come after their soul. And it says, the retributive receivers assign the servitors to follow them and be witnesses of all the sins which they commit, and with a view to the manner and method how they will chastise them in the judgments. It says, yeah, and then just this last part, it says, hearken therefore that I may discourse with you concerning the soul according to as I've said. The 5 great rulers of the great fate of the ions, and the rulers of the disk of the sun, and the rulers of the disk of the moon, breathe into that soul, and there cometh out of them a portion of my power, as I have just said. And the portion of that power remains within the soul, so that the soul can stand. And they put the counterfeiting spirit outside the soul, watching it and assigned to it. And the rulers bind it to the soul with their seals and their bonds, and seal it to it, that it may compel it always, so that it continually does its mischiefs and all its iniquities, in order that it may be their slave always, and remain under their sway always in the changes of the body. And they seal to it that it may be in all the sin and all the desires of the world. The parents we are to abandon. Quote, for this cause, therefore, have I in this manner brought the mysteries in this world, which undo the bonds of the counterfeiting spirit. Anyway, so it's like basically saying that they're causing you to do all these iniquities so that basically they can punish. Is that they always have you as a slave. I mean, this was written in the Gnostic text, that basically it's like a prison, or that they're gathering the light up and stealing our light power, and just interesting stuff.
Very, yes.
So we'll get way deeper into that when we talk about religion, but just kind of wanted to throw it out there. And then the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and then I think just the L. Ron Hubbard stuff, and we'll be done. So
yeah, okay.
The Tibetan Book of the Dead. So I found this online. It says the text describes the process of death and rebirth in terms of three intermediate states, or bardos. The first and briefest is the bardo of the moment of death, when at the end of a process of sensory dissolution that presages physical death, a profound state of consciousness called the clear light dawns. If one is able to recognize the clear light as reality, one immediately achieves liberation from samsara, the cycle of rebirth. And the text says, O nobly born, listen. Now you are experiencing the radiance of the clear light of pure reality. Recognize it. O nobly born, thy present intellect in real nature void, not formed into anything as regards characteristics or color, naturally void is the very reality, the all good. Thine own intellect, which is now voidness, yet not to be regarded as the voidness of nothingness, but as being the intellect itself, unobstructed, shining, thrilling, and blissful, is the very consciousness, the all good Buddha. And Francesca Fremantle, she helped translate the Tibetan, one of the Tibetan Books of the Dead, and she wrote a book called Luminous Emptiness, Understanding the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And in it, she writes, according to the teachings of natural liberation, the instructions concerning this bardo are in 3 parts: illusory body, dreaming, and luminosity, or clear light. The practice of illusory body trains us to see waking life as a dream, and to realize that our whole subjectively experienced world is the creation of the mind, just like a magician's illusion, insubstantial and impermanent. This realization is fundamental to all practices related to the bardos. It is a particularly necessary preparation for working with dreams, because dreams arise from karmic traces deeply imprinted in the mind, and so they are very hard to influence directly. Only after our intense attachment to our ordinary concept of reality is loosened does it become possible to perceive the world of dreams too as our own creation and to control it. The practice of luminosity is simply to recognize and rest in the basic nature of mind itself, its emptiness, radiance, and clarity. So it says the true luminosity of our awakened nature is called the basic luminosity or mother luminosity. It dawns at the moment of death, and it is recognized. The mother and child meet and become one in liberation. Luminosity is often translated as clear light, which is a literal rendering of the Tibetan rather than the Sanskrit. Trungpa Rinpoche did not like that term, although he did sometimes use it in his talks. That's the guy she co-wrote the book with, which formed the basis of his books because it's so well known. He felt it had become inextricably associated with such notions as the light at the end of the tunnel in near-death experiences, and that it gave too much of an impression of ordinary visual light, whereas what is meant is an extremely subtle concept that he thought would be better conveyed by luminosity. The two terms luminosity and clarity are frequently not distinguished and are translated by the same word in English, so that we find clear light, luminosity, or clarity for both. They are certainly very close, since clarity here is not just clear and transparent, but also bright and luminous. I just want to mention that because people are saying like, well, the clear light is the white light, but according to these people that translated the Tibetan Book of the Dead, that's not the case. They're talking about it has no color, it's just clear, it's clarity, you know. In fact, the Tibetan Book of the Dead says, now when the bardo of dying dawns upon me, I will abandon all grasping, yearning, and attachment, enter undistracted into clear awareness of the teaching, and eject my consciousness into the space of unborn Rigpa. As I leave this compound body of flesh and blood, I will know it to be a transitory illusion. This self-originated clear light, which from the very beginning was never born, is the child of Rigpa, which itself without any parents. How amazing. And the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying describes Rigpa as a, quote, primordial, pure, pristine awareness that is at once intelligent, cognizant, radiant, and always awake. And then finally, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, I want to include this, it says, do not take pleasure in the soft white light of the gods. Do not be attracted to it or yearn for it. If you are attracted to it, you will wander in the realm of the gods and circle among the 6 kinds of existence. It's an obstacle blocking the path of liberation, so do not look at it. So like in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, there's these series of lights that appear, like these, like a brighter light, a dimmer light, and there's the,
Right.
like wrathful deities and pleasant ones that are also associated with some of these. It's just a really interesting. If you're looking at what happens in between lives, the Tibetan Book of the Dead is something people should definitely look into.
Yeah, that just reminds me also of the near-death experiences. They do describe the light in various ways. It's not always the same. Sometimes it looks like
Right.
the sun, or brighter than the sun, or white, or golden. Different.
Sometimes misty, sometimes cloudy, sometimes pure. Yeah.
But the clear, it's interesting, the clarity and the clearness that you're talking about. It's almost like, so it's like a, for me, it gives the impression of being sober minded or very high consciousness, and not this sort of, I don't know, when the NDEers talk about the light, it's almost like they lose their sense of rationality or something, and they just kind of get lost in it, and it's like a trance almost, or it's alluring and they're drawn to it, and these kinds of things are like, well, then how much thinking are you doing, or critical thinking are you doing in those
They're
cases?
reacting. Yeah. It's almost like they're still caught in that illusion area. That what they call it, samsara, or illusion. Okay, so finally we're going to talk about L. Ron Hubbard. Yes, him of Scientology fame, because you know we feel we would be remiss if we're talking about the topic of in between lives and not talk about him, because you know, before anybody claims that we're shills or that we're promoting Scientology, it's just absolutely not the case at all. It's just that the man deserves a little bit of credit for mentioning soul traps, memory wipes, and implants over 70 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's interesting. He was an officer in the Navy during World War II, where he briefly commanded 2 ships, but was removed from command both times. So, maybe it's like, naval intelligence, who knows what's behind all this. But anyway, L. Ron Hubbard, I found this online. It says, L. Ron Hubbard taught that when people die, their souls are captured by extraterrestrials he called implanters and taken to between lives implanting stations. Hubbard talked about between lives implanting stations where the memories of the newly dead are wiped out and erased according to Hubbard. The souls or thetans of the newly dead are then implanted with implants designed to control and enslave them in their next lifetime. And he wrote in 1952, under the title Audit. This book later became known as Scientology: A History of Man. And some of the stuff in the book, like he says, in the third place, these facsimiles have not been invalidated by the shock of a death and the helpful hands of the Between Lives crew, and so are normally visible. And it says a common history of the theta line as applied to your pre-clear starts with his separation from the main body of theta, continues through home universe, runs into his entrapment by MEST, which is matter, energy, space, time beings, and then through life as we know it with its cycle of birth. MEST, body, living, death, between lives, wipe out, and birth again. Now, there's a lot of terminology in Scientology, as people are probably well aware, so it's a little, to know terms like pre-clear and everything, it's a little confusing, but you can see he was talking about between lives and memory wipes, clearly. And then there's a section between lives in his book that says, at death, the theta being leaves the body and goes to the between lives area. Here he reports in, is given a strong forgetter implant, and is then shot down to a body just before it's born. At least that is the way the old invader in the Earth area was operating. The implant is very interesting. The pre-clear is seated before a wheel which contains numbers of pictures. As the wheel turns, these pictures go away from him. He is moved aside to the right, the left, then back. A mirror arrangement shows him still sitting there before the pictures. A force screen hits him through the pictures. The pictures dim out. The whole effect is to give him the impression that he has no past life, that he is no longer the same identity, that his memory has been erased. So, some of the details of it seem a little quaint nowadays. It's almost 100 years, 70 years later. But I mean, basically, he's just saying that there's this memory wipe, and how it's actually done, who really knows? But it's interesting. He says, gradually through a lifetime, this between lives incident keys in. At first, it engulfs childhood, then later years. Finally, with age, the pre-clear starts to cycle through it automatically and goes into a second childhood. It says pre-clears don't always report. To have been implanted once is to get a re-stimulation on dying, which will wipe out the past life. Some have 1, some have 5, some more of these implants. The life-to-life forgetter would follow as a natural course of events from the fact that the pre-clear identifies himself and is identified by others as a messed body. Further, he identifies everyone else as a messed body, matter, energy, space-time. As he would rather start if he must be a messed body with a clean slate and a new body. Also, he has many overt acts at convincing others they should forget their entire past, for by that he can train them for a better future for him. No implant would ever succeed unless there was a natural cause and reason for the implant to magnify. The report area for most has been Mars. Some women report to stations elsewhere in the solar system. These are occasional incidents about Earth report. There are occasional incidents about Earth report stations. The report stations are protected by screens. The last Martian report station on Earth was established in the Pyrenees. Entities have between life incidents independent of the Thetan. These are not necessary to run. There are many types of between lives earlier on the track, about 10 different periods. But he says it's how they keep races enslaved. So, Hubbard was talking about Earth as a sort of prison planet where humans are enslaved. And now, I mean, being an avid science fiction reader, he might have gotten this idea from some sci-fi books, which had talked about planets as penal colonies or prison planets. Prior to that, there were some books that were written, and maybe combined them with his wanting to make money by starting a religion. He might have put together some details from his imagination, but like as I said, it's interesting, these books about between lives that came out before Raymond Moody's book about the NDEs, they never mentioned the light or the white light. He's talking about Mars and
Yeah.
and then there's a section on theta traps. So just this last little thing, and then we'll be done. It says theta traps. There's no subject more interesting than that of theta traps. It's of vast interest to any invader. It is of vaster interest to your pre-clear. How can you trap a Thetan? By curiosity, by giving him awards and prizes of an implant, by retractor screens, by mock-ups, by ornate buildings which he will enter unsuspectingly only to be electronicked down. By many such means the Thetan is reduced from knowing to a colonist, a slave, a messed body. All theta traps have one thing in common. They use electronic force to knock the Thetan into forgetting, into unknowingness, into effect. The Thetan feels himself in some traps being drawn up to a post. He fights it with his force. He cannot successfully be lot, he succumbs. So anyway, he's talking about implants and means of electronics and stuff. I mean, it's interesting that he was talking about all this like 70 years ago.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it. A lot of
Okay,
stuff.
it's a lot of
We could probably do
information.
an episode on any one of these alone, but it might be too much memory or information overload for some people.
Yeah.
Smaller chunks sometimes is better.
I forgot to ask you, I don't know if we know what we're doing next, but I guess
Maybe
we
the
can.
aliens one, or because that's really important, the connection between aliens and the near-death experience and the white light, and how they're supposedly guiding us on this evolutionary, quote unquote, evolutionary path on Earth, that they throw us into these bodies, and yeah, or we could do one on astral projection. I don't know. There's just different ones.
Okay, well, and all of you listening, feel free to comment and give us maybe some of your thoughts on the shows that you would like to see. We really appreciate the listeners that we mentioned earlier in the show, this episode. We appreciate your input. So I guess we'll close down.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another
Okay.
successful episode, I hope.
So thank you so much to everyone watching. This has been Julie McVeigh
And Wayne
with
Bush.
Wayne Bush with Sovereign Spirits. And if you enjoyed this, of course, give it a thumbs up. And if you like this type of content that we are putting up on the channel, subscribe, and that will help us get this material out. And then if you hit the bell icon, you'll be alerted to future videos as they come out. And we hope you're having a fantastic day, as much as you can on this planet, or evening, wherever you are.
Truth.
And all right, we'll see you all next time.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.